Drama don't hold the reins. Tourist words battle with royal king's guard. Emma had always dreamed of visiting the grand royal palace. She had seen countless times in books and on travel blogs. The palace, with its towering spires, golden gates, and perfectly manicured gardens, seemed almost unreal in her imagination. But as her taxi wound its way through the crowded streets, the reality of the palace began to sink in. She felt a rush of excitement, mixed with a twinge of nervousness. This was her first trip to Europe, and she had read so many stories about tourists who made small mistakes and accidentally got themselves into trouble. She was determined to be careful, but at the same time, she wanted to see and experience everything the city had to offer. When the taxi stopped, Emma and her small group of friends stepped out into the bright sunlight, their eyes widening at the sight before them. The palace gates were immense, covered in gold filigree that shimmered in the light. The walls were tall and smooth, lined with delicate carvings that told stories from centuries past. Guards in crisp, formal uniforms stood at attention, their faces stoic, as though carved from stone. Emma felt a thrill run through her. This was history standing right in front of her, living and breathing, and she was finally there. As the group walked toward the main entrance, Emma pulled out her camera. She had promised herself that she would capture every angle, every detail, every fleeting moment. Her friends were chatting softly, commenting on the beauty of the gardens and the elegance of the palace, but Emma was already absorbed in framing her first shot. She crouched down to get a better angle of the gates, her fingers steady despite the excitement in her chest. "This is unbelievable," she whispered almost to herself. "It looks even better than in the pictures." The palace guards remained perfectly still, their eyes straight ahead. Emma noticed the way they shifted their weight just slightly, maintaining perfect posture despite the heat of the day. She marveled at the discipline it must take to stand for hours without moving. She had read about ceremonial guards before, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. She snapped a few more photos, adjusting her lens to capture the details of the golden patterns. Her friends had moved a little further ahead, leaving her momentarily alone near one of the side gates. Feeling adventurous, Emma decided to explore a little more closely. She didn't want to cross any rules, but she wanted a better view of the intricate designs on the palace walls. She stepped carefully along the stone pathway, keeping her camera raised, and took a deep breath. The sun was warm on her face, and the sound of birds in the gardens created a serene atmosphere. For a moment, she forgot she was in a foreign country and simply marveled at the beauty surrounding her. However, as she moved closer to one of the gates, she noticed that one of the guards had begun to watch her more closely. His posture remained firm, but his eyes followed her every movement. Emma smiled politely and whispered, "Don't worry, I'm just admiring the palace." She hoped her tone would show that she meant no harm, but the guard's expression didn't change. Emma felt a small shiver of unease. She realized that maybe she was getting too close. She had heard that some areas of the palace were restricted, but the map she had been given wasn't very clear. Curiosity won over caution. Emma leaned slightly to get a better shot of a carved figure on the wall, a small angel holding a shield. "This is incredible," she murmured, pointing the camera upward. She clicked the shutter several times, completely absorbed in her photography. She didn't notice the guard stepping a few paces closer. His boots made no sound on the smooth stone, but his presence was unmistakable. Emma finally looked up and their eyes met. She quickly straightened, giving him a polite nod. The guard raised a gloved hand, signaling her to stop. Emma felt a moment of panic. She had read stories of tourists being asked to leave restricted areas, but she had never imagined it happening to her. She took a cautious step back and tried to explain in her simple English, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was too close." The guard's expression remained unreadable. He pointed to a small sign she hadn't noticed, indicating that the area was off-limits to visitors. Emma realized her mistake and felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She turned to her friends who were watching the interaction from a short distance. They were trying not to laugh, but their eyes were wide with concern. Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She smiled at the guard and said politely, "Thank you." "I understand." The guard nodded once and stepped back, returning to his rigid stance. Emma moved away from the restricted area, feeling both relieved and a little foolish. She had only wanted to admire the palace up close, and yet her innocent curiosity had caused a small stir. As she continued walking along the pathway, she began to notice more details around her. The gardens were filled with flowers in full bloom, their colors bright against the green grass. Fountains bubbled softly, and the sound of flowing water added to the palace's serene atmosphere. Emma paused frequently to take photos, making sure to stay within the allowed areas this time. She noticed other tourists doing the same, some whispering to each other about the palace's history, others posing for photos with the guards in the background. Despite her earlier embarrassment, Emma felt a growing excitement. This palace was alive with history, and she was experiencing it firsthand. Every corner she turned revealed something new: a statue, a painting, a carved doorframe with delicate patterns. She felt like a character in a storybook, wandering through a place that had existed for centuries. Her camera clicked constantly, capturing moments she knew she would treasure forever. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, Emma found a quiet bench near a fountain. She sat down to catch her breath and review the photos she had taken. Each image seemed more beautiful than the last, capturing not just the palace itself, but also the feeling of being there, surrounded by history and elegance. She thought about the guards again, standing silently and resolutely, and she felt a newfound respect for them. Their job was not easy. They had to remain alert and disciplined at all times, and now she understood the importance of following their instructions. Emma's friends joined her on the bench, chatting excitedly about what they had seen so far. They compared notes on which areas were most impressive and shared their favorite photographs. Emma laughed softly, realizing how much she had been absorbed in her own world. She had almost forgotten that she was traveling with others. That part of the joy of travel was sharing experiences. She listened to her friends' stories and added her own observations, describing the carvings she had photographed and the details she had noticed in the gardens. By the time they stood to continue exploring, Emma felt a sense of accomplishment. She had navigated the palace grounds carefully, learned a small but important lesson about rules and respect, and captured moments she would remember forever. She felt a deeper connection to the place than she had anticipated. It was not just a building, but a living piece of history, with traditions and rules that had endured for generations. Emma knew that this was just the beginning of her journey, and she could hardly wait to see what else awaited her in the palace and the city beyond. As they walked toward the next section of the palace, Emma glanced back at the guards standing like statues along the gates. She felt a quiet admiration for their dedication and a renewed sense of awareness about her actions. Even though she had been slightly reckless at first, she had learned quickly, and the experience made her feel more confident and prepared for the rest of her adventure. She raised her camera one last time for a photo of the main gate, smiling as she captured the perfect shot. This was a moment she would never forget, a memory of wonder, learning, and the beginning of a story that was just unfolding. Emma and her friends moved deeper into the palace grounds, stepping cautiously along the wide stone paths that led toward the central courtyard. The sun was higher now, warming the marble floors, and the palace seemed even more alive under its golden light. Tourists surrounded them, many speaking in different languages, their voices a soft hum that filled the air. Yet despite the crowd, Emma felt a strange sense of intimacy with the place, as though she had stepped into another world, one where history was alive and every corner had a story to tell. Her eyes wandered across the courtyard, where fountains sparkled in the sunlight. Water danced gracefully, creating arcs that shimmered like tiny rainbows. Emma crouched to take a photograph, fascinated by the way the water glistened against the backdrop of the palace walls. Her friends stood nearby, admiring a series of statues that lined the edge of the courtyard. Each statue depicted a figure from the palace's long history, carved in intricate detail, from the folds of their robes to the expressions on their faces. Emma snapped photos of the statues too, marveling at the skill of the sculptors who had created such lifelike work centuries ago. As she straightened and looked around, Emma noticed a small sign tucked beside a stone pillar. The letters were faded, but she could make out the words, "Restricted area, authorized personnel only." A chill ran down her spine as she realized she had unknowingly approached a section of the palace that tourists were not allowed to enter. She glanced at the nearest guard who was watching her closely. Emma smiled politely, hoping to show that she meant no harm. "Maybe I should just stay here," she whispered to herself, stepping back slightly, but curiosity tugged at her. The restricted area was small, almost hidden, yet it seemed to hold secrets. Emma's camera had already captured countless views of the palace, but she felt a strange pull to see what lay beyond the sign. She knew it was risky, but the urge to explore was strong. Her friends, sensing her hesitation, moved a few steps ahead, giving her some space. "Don't go too far," one of them called softly. Emma nodded, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She inched closer, her fingers hovering over her camera. Every part of her told her to stop, yet another part urged her to see the unseen, to capture the palace in ways most tourists never could. She crouched slightly, peering around the corner, careful not to make sudden movements. That's when she felt it, a shadow moving beside her. One of the palace guards had approached silently, his posture straight and eyes sharp. Emma froze, suddenly aware of the strict rules that governed the palace grounds. The guard raised a gloved hand, signaling her to stop. Emma's heart pounded. She had read about strict palace protocols, but now, standing face to face with a real guard, she understood how serious it could be. I'm sorry," she stammered in her simple English, trying to explain herself. "I didn't mean to go too close." The guard's expression remained stern. He did not speak, only gestured with a slight nod for her to step back. Emma obeyed immediately, feeling a mix of embarrassment and nervousness. She realized that her innocent curiosity had almost caused a problem. The guard's eyes never left her as she retreated, his gaze firm but not threatening. Once she was safely away from the restricted area, Emma took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. Her friends hurried over, concern written on their faces. "Are you okay?" one of them asked. Emma nodded, though her hands were still shaking slightly. Yes, I'm fine," she replied. She felt both relieved and humbled, realizing that even small actions could have consequences in a place like this. Her experience with the guard had taught her a lesson she would not forget. Admiration for history was one thing, but respect for rules and tradition was just as important. After a moment, Emma allowed herself to relax and look around again. The palace courtyard was more than just a collection of stones and statues. It was a place where centuries of history and culture came together. The fountains sparkled, birds flitted across the gardens, and the distant sound of bells added a rhythm to the serene atmosphere. Emma felt a sense of wonder mixed with respect, a feeling that she had stepped into something much larger than herself. As they continued walking, Emma noticed another group of tourists approaching. They were laughing and chatting, taking selfies with the guards in the background. One of them accidentally stepped too close to the restricted area, and the nearest guard immediately raised a hand, signaling them to step back. Emma watched closely, realizing that the guard's role was not just about standing still and looking imposing. It was about maintaining order and protecting the integrity of the palace. Her thoughts were interrupted by a small commotion near one of the side gates. A tourist had clearly misjudged the rules, gesturing and speaking loudly to a guard. Emma felt a shiver of recognition. She had almost been in the same situation. She moved closer to observe, curious about how the interaction would unfold. The guard spoke quietly but firmly, explaining the rule. The tourist seemed confused, gesturing and speaking in a language Emma did not understand. It took a few tense moments, but finally the tourist nodded and stepped back. The guard returned to his post, and order was restored. Emma reflected on what she had seen. She realized that travel was not only about seeing beautiful places, but also about understanding the rules and traditions of a new culture. What might seem like a small joke or a harmless gesture could have much larger implications in a setting with such strict protocols. She made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to explore, but always with awareness and respect. They moved on to another part of the palace, a quieter area with shaded walkways and benches. Emma sat down to rest for a moment, looking around at the perfectly trimmed hedges and the delicate flowers. The air was filled with the scent of blooming roses, and the sunlight filtered softly through the leaves. It was peaceful, almost magical, and Emma felt her earlier tension fade. She picked up her camera again, determined to capture the tranquility and elegance of this hidden corner. While reviewing her photos, Emma noticed a small plaque near a fountain. It told the story of a historical event that had taken place in the courtyard centuries ago. Reading it, she felt a connection to the past, imagining the people who had once walked these same paths, their lives intertwined with the palace's history. She shared the story with her friends, who listened attentively, and together they discussed how the past and present seemed to coexist in this space. Time passed quickly, and soon it was nearing midday. The crowd of tourists had grown, but Emma felt more confident navigating the palace grounds. She had learned to observe the guards, read the signs, and respect boundaries without letting curiosity fade. She had also learned an important lesson about humility. Sometimes, being too eager to explore could lead to unintended consequences. Emma knew she would carry this lesson with her for the rest of her travels. As they walked toward the palace's main hall, Emma glanced back one last time at the guard who had corrected her earlier. He was standing tall and watchful, as if nothing had happened, yet Emma felt a wave of gratitude toward him. Without his quiet guidance, she might have crossed a line that could have caused serious trouble. She realized that rules, while sometimes strict, were there to protect the beauty and history of the place she had come to admire. Finally, Emma and her friends reached a large set of doors leading into the main hall of the palace. The doors were intricately carved with scenes from the kingdom's past, and the golden handles glimmered in the sunlight. Emma paused to take a photograph, feeling a thrill of anticipation. Inside, she knew, awaited even more wonders, rooms filled with paintings, tapestries, and artifacts that had survived for centuries. Her heart raced with excitement, but she also felt a quiet sense of respect. She was no longer just a tourist. She was a visitor in a place of history, tradition, and enduring beauty. As they pushed open the doors and stepped inside, Emma took one last deep breath of the warm air from the courtyard. She felt ready to continue her journey, eager to learn more, explore more, and capture more memories. But she also carried with her a newfound awareness, an understanding that curiosity and respect must always go hand in hand, especially in a place as magnificent and important as this royal palace. Emma and her friends entered the main hall of the palace, their footsteps echoing softly against the marble floors. The hall was enormous, far larger than anything Emma had imagined. High ceilings arched above them, decorated with detailed paintings of kings, queens, and grand battles. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, scattering light across the polished floor. The air felt different here, cooler, quieter, and filled with a sense of reverence. Emma could feel history pressing softly against her senses, reminding her that she was walking where generations before had walked. As she lifted her camera to take a photo, she noticed the guards stationed along the hall. Unlike the ones outside, these guards moved with quiet precision, subtly adjusting their stance, scanning the hall without disturbing the calm. Their presence was gentle yet firm, a silent reminder that even here in this magnificent space, rules mattered. Emma felt a shiver of both awe and nervousness. She wanted to capture everything, but she also didn't want to accidentally disrespect the palace. Her friends began moving toward a side gallery filled with paintings of past monarchs. Emma followed, her eyes flicking from painting to painting. The portraits were striking, their subjects painted with such detail that it almost felt as though the kings and queens might step out of their frames. Emma paused before one particularly grand portrait, a king with a golden crown and a serious gaze. She studied the intricate brushwork and the rich colors, marveling at the skill of the artist. "Look at this," one of her friends whispered. "It's amazing how realistic it feels." Emma nodded, lifting her camera to take a careful photo. As she did, she noticed a guard standing near the corner of the room. He was watching her closely, his posture straight, his eyes sharp. Emma felt a flicker of nervousness. She remembered her earlier encounter outside and hoped this time she would not get into any trouble. Trying to focus on the painting, Emma didn't notice herself stepping slightly closer to the guard's path. She whispered a comment to her friends, joking softly about how serious the guards looked. "They don't even blink," she said, trying to make it lighthearted. But the guard's eyes shifted toward her, narrowing just slightly. Emma didn't mean any harm, she was only making a small joke, but the words, spoken in the wrong place, carried a weight she hadn't realized. The guard approached. Emma felt her heart jump. She straightened immediately, smiling politely. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean anything disrespectful." The guard's expression remained unreadable. He raised a gloved hand slightly, gesturing for her to stop. Emma's friends noticed the tension and gathered around her, whispering, "Are you okay?" Emma nodded, though she could feel the heat rising to her cheeks. She tried to explain again, "I was just joking. I didn't mean to be rude." The guard's gaze remained fixed, calm but unyielding. It was clear that he took his duty seriously and that humor, even light-hearted, was not acceptable in this sacred space. Emma felt a mix of embarrassment and apprehension. She had always been talkative and playful, but here, in the presence of history and tradition, she realized that her words could create real tension. Her friends stayed close, giving quiet support. One of them whispered, "Maybe we should just move on." Emma nodded, taking a careful step back, trying to show respect without appearing afraid, yet curiosity still tugged at her. She wanted to see the rest of the hall, to capture every angle and detail, but now she understood that she needed to be mindful of her words and actions. Even a casual comment could spark a serious reaction. The guard stepped closer, his presence commanding but not aggressive. Emma realized she had to think quickly. She lowered her voice and said respectfully, "I will be more careful. Thank you for letting me know." The guard's eyes softened just slightly, and he gave a small nod before stepping back into his post. Emma exhaled slowly, relieved that the situation had passed without incident. Her friends smiled at her quietly, trying not to laugh but clearly finding humor in how tense she had been. Emma decided it was time to focus fully on the palace itself. She moved toward a smaller gallery where tapestries hung along the walls. Each tapestry depicted a scene from the kingdom's history: grand battles, royal ceremonies, and peaceful gatherings in the gardens. The colors were rich, the details painstakingly woven. Emma's camera clicked as she tried to capture the beauty, but her mind kept returning to the guard's wordless warning. She realized that being in such a place required more than curiosity. It required thoughtfulness and awareness. As she studied a tapestry depicting a royal ceremony, Emma overheard a guide speaking to another group. He explained the significance of the guards in the palace, how they were not only protectors but symbols of the kingdom's discipline and tradition. Emma listened intently, realizing that the guards' seriousness was not meant to intimidate, but to maintain respect for centuries of history. She felt a deep sense of appreciation for their role and for the rules that kept the palace orderly and safe. Despite the earlier tension, Emma could not suppress a small laugh when she noticed another tourist attempting to mimic the poses of the guards outside. The guard overseeing that area moved subtly, signaling the tourist to stop. Emma understood immediately why. Although it might seem funny, it could be seen as disrespectful. She made a mental note. Curiosity was fine, humor was fine, but awareness and respect were even more important. As they moved deeper into the hall, Emma's attention was caught by a grand staircase. The stairs spiraled upward, their railings carved with intricate patterns of leaves and flowers. Sunlight streamed through high windows, creating patterns on the marble floors. Emma couldn't resist taking photographs, climbing carefully to capture the staircase from different angles. A guard stood at the base, his eyes tracking her, but she stayed within bounds, careful not to overstep. The group reached a smaller room at the top of the staircase. It was filled with artifacts: crowns, scepters, ceremonial robes, and delicate jewelry. Emma's eyes widened at the sheer beauty and craftsmanship. She examined each item carefully, imagining the kings and queens who had once worn them and the ceremonies in which they had played a role. Every piece told a story, and Emma felt honored to witness it. While admiring a crown encrusted with precious stones, Emma whispered a comment about how heavy it must have been to wear. Her friends giggled softly, but the sound carried just enough to attract the attention of a guard stationed nearby. He approached quietly, not angrily, but with a measured presence that reminded Emma of the importance of silence and respect in this sacred place. Emma lowered her voice, speaking respectfully. "I understand. We will be quiet." The guard gave a small nod and stepped back, satisfied that she had acknowledged the rule. Emma realized that she was learning quickly how to navigate a space filled with rules, yet still experience its beauty fully. Each interaction with the guards was a lesson in patience, observation, and respect. They continued through the hall, exploring room after room filled with treasures of the kingdom. Emma noticed details she had never seen in photographs: small carvings on doors, hidden motifs in paintings, and inscriptions on delicate objects. She felt a growing connection to the history, a sense that the stories and traditions of the palace were alive, waiting to be understood and appreciated. By the time they reached the end of the main hall, Emma felt both exhilarated and humbled. She had witnessed incredible beauty, interacted with vigilant guards, and learned lessons about respect, patience, and observation. She understood now that her words mattered, that even casual remarks could influence how she was perceived. Humor and curiosity were wonderful, but they needed to be tempered with awareness and sensitivity to her surroundings. As they exited the hall into another courtyard, Emma took a deep breath of the fresh air, feeling a sense of accomplishment. She had faced small tensions, learned from them, and continued to enjoy her adventure. The palace, with all its grandeur, had taught her something more than history. It had taught her about herself, about respect, and about the delicate balance between curiosity and caution. Emma glanced at the guards standing tall at their posts, realizing she had a newfound admiration for them. Their role was not easy. They maintained order, protected priceless history, and silently taught visitors lessons about responsibility and decorum. Emma felt grateful for their presence, understanding now that the palace was not only a place of beauty, but also a place of learning, discipline, and tradition. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courtyard, Emma and her friends continued to explore, moving toward a quiet garden that promised even more wonders. Emma felt a mixture of excitement and careful awareness, knowing that the rest of her visit would require the same balance she had learned so far. Curiosity guided by respect, observation paired with mindfulness, and joy tempered by understanding. She raised her camera one last time before leaving the hall, capturing a final image that would remind her of this lesson forever. After leaving the main hall, Emma and her friends walked toward the palace's inner gardens. The warm afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall trees, casting dappled shadows on the winding stone paths. The gardens were quieter than the bustling courtyard they had left behind, offering a serene space filled with the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft hum of birds. Emma felt a sense of relief. The tension from her earlier encounters with the guards began to fade, replaced by curiosity and wonder. The garden was laid out with perfect symmetry. Flower beds in every color imaginable stretched alongside the paths, and delicate fountains bubbled in the center of circular courtyards. Benches dotted the area, inviting visitors to sit and admire the beauty. Emma paused to photograph a row of roses, their petals soft and glistening under the sunlight. She was fascinated by how such delicate flowers could thrive in such a formal, controlled environment, much like the palace itself, beautiful yet carefully regulated. As Emma moved further along the path, she noticed a group of tourists gathered near a marble fountain, their voices low and respectful. A guide was explaining the history of the palace's gardens, pointing out statues, hidden nooks, and the stories behind the fountains. Emma and her friends joined the group, listening intently. She learned that the gardens had been designed centuries ago to provide peace and reflection for the royal family, and that each section of the garden carried symbolic meaning. Emma felt honored to be walking in a space with such thought and care behind it. However, the calm was soon interrupted. A loud voice broke the soft murmur of the garden. Emma turned to see a tourist arguing with a guard, gesturing animatedly while trying to explain something. The tourist had clearly misjudged the rules, stepping too close to a restricted area near one of the fountains. Emma felt a pang of recognition and sympathy. She remembered how nervous she had felt in a similar situation earlier. She watched carefully as the guard, calm but firm, signaled the tourist to step back. The tension in the air was immediate, drawing the attention of other visitors. Emma's friends whispered to her, "Do you think she will be okay?" Emma nodded slowly. She had learned that even polite missteps could cause a scene in the palace, especially if the guards felt that rules were being ignored. She felt grateful for the earlier lesson she had received. It had prepared her to understand the importance of following guidelines and to avoid unintentionally disrespecting the space. Emma continued to walk, her mind alert to her surroundings. She noticed a small gate leading to an area labeled "Authorized Personnel Only." She immediately stepped back, remembering the strict rules she had already encountered. Curiosity still tugged at her, but she reminded herself that respect and caution were more important than getting a closer look. She whispered to her friends, "I think I understand now why the guards are so serious. This place is beautiful, but it needs to be protected." As they moved deeper into the garden, a different guard approached them, walking with quiet authority. Emma felt her pulse quicken slightly, but she greeted him politely. The guard gave a nod and pointed toward another path, subtly reminding visitors of the areas they could access. Emma realized that the guards' presence was not meant to intimidate, but to guide and protect. She smiled internally at the thought, appreciating their role in maintaining both safety and respect for the palace's history. While exploring a small alcove filled with statues of mythical figures, Emma's attention was caught by a plaque describing the significance of the figures. She read aloud to her friends, "These statues represent virtues like courage, wisdom, and loyalty." They were meant to inspire both the royal family and visitors. Emma felt a quiet thrill. It was as though the palace itself was teaching her a lesson, reinforcing what she had already begun to understand about respect, awareness, and careful observation. Suddenly, she heard a soft but firm voice behind her. Turning, Emma saw the same guard who had spoken to her earlier in the main hall. He walked slowly toward her, not with anger but with purpose. Emma straightened immediately, remembering the previous encounter. The guard gestured for her to come with him, indicating that they needed to speak privately. Her heart began to race, a mixture of curiosity and nervousness flooding her mind. Her friends exchanged worried glances but stayed nearby, allowing her to follow the guard. Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. She didn't know what to expect. Was she in trouble? Had she done something wrong without realizing it? The guard led her to a small, quiet room tucked behind the main garden area. The room was simple yet elegant, with polished wooden floors and a single large window that let in soft sunlight. Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The guard spoke quietly but clearly. "Earlier, your words in the main hall were noticed," he said. "It is important to understand that joking about the guards or the palace can be seen as disrespectful, even if it is not intended that way." Emma nodded earnestly. "I understand," she said softly. "I didn't mean any disrespect. I was just trying to be lighthearted." The guard's expression softened slightly. "I see," he replied. "We do not punish visitors for curiosity or mistakes, but it is our duty to explain the rules and ensure that everyone understands them. You are lucky to have learned this lesson early." Emma felt a wave of relief. She had been nervous about the encounter, but now she realized that it was meant as guidance, not reprimand. She felt grateful for the patience and professionalism of the guards. The guard continued, explaining the importance of rules in preserving the palace's history. "Every action in the palace matters," he said. "Even small gestures, words, or movements can affect the experience for others or damage something valuable. The palace has stood for centuries because people have respected its traditions and structures." Emma listened attentively, absorbing every word. She felt a deeper understanding of the significance of her surroundings and a renewed commitment to behaving thoughtfully. After the conversation, the guard nodded, signaling that their discussion was complete. Emma thanked him sincerely, feeling a mix of gratitude and newfound awareness. She returned to her friends, who greeted her with relief and curiosity. "What did he say?" one asked. Emma smiled. "He just explained the rules and why they matter. Nothing bad, really. I learned a lot." Her friends exchanged relieved smiles, glad that Emma had handled the situation well. As they continued through the garden, Emma reflected on the experience. She realized that her words, though innocent and playful, had the power to influence how others perceived her. She also understood the delicate balance between curiosity and respect. The palace was more than a beautiful place to visit. It was a living lesson in history, tradition, and the importance of mindful behavior. They walked toward a quieter section of the garden, where tall hedges formed a maze. Emma and her friends wandered through the paths, laughing softly as they tried to find their way. Yet even here, Emma remained mindful, avoiding restricted areas and observing the subtle guidance of the guards. She felt a sense of accomplishment. She had navigated both the palace and her own curiosity successfully, learning lessons that would stay with her for life. As the afternoon wore on, the garden seemed to transform. Shadows grew longer, sunlight took on a golden hue, and the air carried a gentle warmth. Emma paused near a small fountain, watching the water ripple in the fading light. She thought about the guards, their quiet authority, and the lessons they had taught her. She realized that their strictness was not meant to discourage visitors, but to preserve a place of immense beauty and history. Respect, she understood now, was a form of appreciation, just as important as admiration or curiosity. Emma's friends gathered around her, admiring the view of the palace walls glowing in the evening light. "This has been amazing," one of them said softly. I feel like we've learned as much as we've seen. Emma nodded in agreement, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The palace had offered more than just visual beauty. It had given her lessons about herself, about awareness, and about the power of words. As they made their way back toward the main exit of the garden, Emma felt a quiet pride. She had faced tension, learned quickly, and continued to explore with care. She understood that her actions mattered, and that even small gestures could carry significance. The palace was not just a destination. It was an experience that demanded thoughtfulness, patience, and respect. By the time they exited the garden, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Emma looked back one last time at the palace and its vigilant guards. She felt a sense of gratitude for the lessons she had learned and a newfound admiration for the people who protected such a precious place. The experience had taught her more than she could have imagined, lessons about respect, awareness, and the importance of thoughtful behavior that she would carry with her far beyond this visit. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the palace walls, casting long, golden shadows. Across the cobblestone pathways, Emma and her friends had walked through nearly every section of the royal grounds, taking in the gardens, the grand halls, and the intricate artwork that decorated every corner of the palace. Yet, despite the beauty that surrounded her, Emma felt that the most important part of her visit was not what she had seen, but what she had learned. As they reached the edge of the palace grounds, Emma paused to look back at the golden gates and the guards standing silently at attention. She felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, awe, and a quiet sense of humility. The palace had been more than a tourist attraction. It had been a teacher. The encounters she had with the guards, the small tensions, and the lessons they had imparted lingered in her mind. She realized that travel was about more than photographs and souvenirs. It was about understanding, respecting, and connecting with the places she visited. Walking toward a small cafe near the palace entrance, Emma reflected on her first encounter with the guards outside the gates. She had been naive, playful, and unaware of the weight her words could carry. That moment had caused a flutter of anxiety and embarrassment, but it had also opened her eyes. The guards were not simply figures in stiff uniforms, they were guardians of history, culture, and tradition. Their discipline and attention to detail ensured that every visitor could experience the palace safely and respectfully. Emma felt a deep appreciation for their role, understanding that their presence had enriched her visit in ways she could not have imagined. Sitting at a small table outside the cafe, Emma sipped her coffee and let the warm afternoon sun bathe her face. Her friends were chatting quietly, sharing their favorite moments from the day. Emma pulled out her camera and began reviewing the hundreds of photos she had taken. Each image told a story, not just of the palace, but of her journey of growth and self-awareness. She smiled at a photo of the stern guard in the main hall, standing perfectly still against the backdrop of marble columns. That single image captured more than discipline. It captured the lessons she had learned about respect, patience, and mindfulness. "I can't believe how much I've learned today," Emma said softly, almost to herself. Her friends nodded in agreement. "It's more than just seeing beautiful places," one of them said. "It's about understanding them and the people who protect them." Emma felt a surge of pride. She realized that the lessons she had learned were as valuable as the memories she would carry home. Her experience had taught her about the importance of thinking before speaking, of observing carefully, and of showing respect even in the smallest ways. As they finished their drinks, Emma noticed a small gift shop tucked beside the cafe. She decided to enter, curious to see what souvenirs reflected the history and traditions of the palace. Inside, she found books, miniature replicas of the palace, and delicate trinkets that captured its beauty. Emma picked up a small notebook with the palace engraved on the cover. She knew immediately that she wanted to document her reflections, to write down not only what she had seen, but also what she had felt and learned. Sitting on a bench outside, Emma opened the notebook and began to write. She described the grandeur of the halls, the intricate details of the artwork, and the serene beauty of the gardens. But more importantly, she wrote about the lessons she had learned from the guards, the importance of respect, the power of observation, and the responsibility that comes with curiosity. She realized that her journey was not just about exploring a physical space, but about exploring herself, learning to navigate new experiences with awareness and humility. As she wrote, Emma thought about the moments when she had felt tension or uncertainty. The first time a guard had gestured for her to step back, the silent but firm presence of the guard in the main hall, and the private conversation she had had in the quiet room near the gardens. All of these experiences had shaped her understanding. Each encounter had been a small challenge, but together they had formed a meaningful lesson in self-awareness and respect. Emma felt a quiet satisfaction. She had faced these challenges, learned from them, and emerged more thoughtful and mindful. Her friends wandered nearby, browsing souvenirs and chatting about their own favorite memories. Emma watched them, feeling grateful for their company and support. She realized that shared experiences made the lessons even more meaningful. Together, they had explored the palace, navigated its rules, and reflected on its beauty and history. Emma felt a sense of camaraderie and joy, knowing that their shared stories would be remembered long after they left the palace grounds. As the evening grew darker, the palace gates were bathed in soft light, creating a golden glow that contrasted with the deepening shadows of the gardens. Emma felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. She had experienced tension, learned lessons, and explored incredible beauty. The palace had given her memories that would last a lifetime, but even more importantly, it had given her insights about herself, about the importance of thoughtfulness, respect, and mindfulness. Before leaving, Emma took one last walk along the pathways she had explored earlier. She paused at the fountain where the small commotion had occurred that afternoon, reflecting on how far she had come since then. She realized that what had once caused nervousness now felt like a point of growth. She had learned to observe, to think before speaking, and to appreciate the role of those who maintained order and tradition. The palace, she understood, was a place of learning as much as it was a place of beauty. Emma's friends joined her at the exit, and together they walked toward the taxi that would take them back to their hotel. The streets were quieter now, the city settling into the calm of the evening. Emma felt a sense of closure, as though the palace had shared its story fully and she had listened carefully. She knew that she would carry this experience with her, not just the photographs and souvenirs, but the lessons about respect, observation, and mindful behavior. On the drive back, Emma looked out the window, reflecting on the journey. She thought about how curiosity and playfulness had guided her, but also how awareness and respect had shaped her experience. She realized that every place she visited in the future would offer similar lessons, and that she would be more prepared to approach new cultures, traditions, and rules with understanding. She felt confident that her travel would now be richer, not just in sights and experiences, but in meaningful understanding. When they reached the hotel, Emma and her friends settled into their rooms, tired but exhilarated. Emma opened her notebook again and wrote a final reflection. She described the palace, the guards, and the gardens, but she focused most on the growth she had experienced. She felt proud of herself for learning from each encounter, for taking the lessons seriously, and for applying them in real time. She knew that these experiences would stay with her far longer than any photograph or souvenir. Later that night, as Emma prepared for bed, she thought about the palace one last time. She imagined the guards standing silently in their posts, the halls echoing with centuries of history, and the gardens bathed in moonlight. She felt a quiet gratitude for the lessons she had received and the memories she had created. Traveling, she realized, was not just about seeing new places. It was about learning to respect, understand, and connect with the world in a meaningful way. As she drifted off to sleep, Emma knew that the story of the palace, its guards, and the lessons she had learned would remain a part of her forever. She had arrived as a curious tourist, playful and unaware of the weight her words could carry. She left as someone wiser, more thoughtful, and deeply appreciative of the beauty, discipline, and tradition that had shaped her journey. The palace had not only offered her a glimpse into history, but also a mirror through which she could reflect on herself and her growth. In the days that followed, Emma shared her story with other travelers, describing not only the grandeur of the palace, but the important lessons she had learned. She spoke about curiosity guided by respect, humor tempered by awareness, and the quiet yet firm guidance of those who preserve history. Her tale became a favorite among her friends, a story of adventure, learning, and personal growth. It was a story she would carry with her always, a reminder that even the smallest words and actions can have meaning, and that true understanding comes from both observation and respect.